Hey everybody, this is Jim. I'm an alcoholic. I am a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it is an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys today. I'm just switching myself over here to gallery view so I can see as many of you as possible. So for a moment there, I was just looking at myself, and I've already done a fourth step. I'm sick of looking at myself. Oops, sorry, my phone's going off. How about if I mute that? That's a good idea. Sorry about that. Good to be here with you guys. I was really looking forward to traveling out there this fall, and I had a feeling over the summer that wasn't going to happen. And I'm just amazed by all the hard work that's obviously gone into this. I've been involved in doing some AA events from time to time, and I know the many hands it takes to put on a conference like this when we do it in person. To have to juggle all that stuff into a digital format and make it work as well as this weekend has worked is just absolutely amazing. And I have my oldest daughter is studying to be a speech language pathologist right now down at the University of Towson down in Maryland. And she's fluent in sign language, and she's always talking to us about how important it is for uh, any kind of event that's supposed to be open to people in general. It should have that component. And so it just thrilled me to see that we have sober hands here. Thanks so much to the ladies that are providing that service. That's just amazing. So I'm gonna, well, I know I'm gonna give you one of three talks. My buddy Rick told me there's only three talks in AA. There's the talk that we plan to give. There's the talk that we wish we gave, and then there's the talk that we actually give. So I'm going to give you that third one. Yesterday I was raking leaves. My front yard was out there for about an hour and a half, and just I don't know about you, but my head just when I get into that kind of work, my head just is free to roam, and I was going over all the incredible stories I was going to tell you, and I have a feeling that I'm not going to remember any of those. I'm probably going to tell you some different ones today because that just seems to be the way it works. But that's all right. I'm not worried about that. I've learned over the years to trust that whatever's inside of me that might be of value to you, God has a way of reaching in me and pulling it out and making sure it's available. So I'm gonna just jump in here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to describe to you through a couple of stories what my drinking was like. When I was when I was a senior in high school, I was in the school play. I'd been in the school play for a number of years, and senior year was no exception, except for the fact that in the dressing room before we went out on stage, uh, I think it was either the Friday or the Saturday night performance. My buddy Carl, as we're getting ready and getting dressed, he reaches into his bag and he pulls out this bottle of schnapps, and he says, "Hey, look what I've got for later," because there was going to be a cast party later, and there was going to be a keg of beer, and there was going to be bottles like this being passed around, and we were going to have a great time. And it was my full intention that morning when I got up to go and do the play and then go to the cast party afterwards and get good and drunk. If you had said to me that morning, "Well, are you going to get drunk before you go on stage?" I'd have said, "No, that's crazy. My parents are going to be there. My grandmother's going to be there. Everybody's parents are going to be there, and lots of grandmas. And why would I? Why in the world would I want to do that? Go out on stage drunk in front of everybody?" But I didn't yet have the understanding of what happened when I put alcohol in my body. And this is one of the earliest stories that my sponsor helped me walk myself back through my own experiences so that I could diagnose whether or not I was truly alcoholic. He had asked me, "Did you ever have an experience where you meant to have a drink, you meant to have maybe a couple of drinks, but you didn't mean to get drunk? You didn't mean to drink as much as you did. You know, that maybe you had a plan to drink, but you drank through that plan." And Carl's got this bottle, and he says, "Hey, do you want to hit now?" And I thought, yeah, why not? And he screwed the cap off and he took a slug and handed it to me, and I took a slug, and that's all we were going to do. That was the plan, right? Just a slug of a little bit of schnapps before I go out there. That's not, I knew already at this point, that's not going to get me drunk. It's just going to loosen me up. And it did. That's what alcohol does when it hits my body. It loosens me up. I'm able to talk to girls. I'm able to go out on stage and sing in front of people, and I don't even sing very well, so that tells you how freeing alcohol can be, that it can give me the courage to do that kind of thing. And I handed him the bottle back, and he put the cap on it, and he put it back in his bag, and then he left the room to go out. We were in one of the classrooms that we were using as a dressing room, and he left to go backstage where we were supposed to gather before the show started. And I'm there in that dressing room alone, and I'm looking at that bag, and I'm thinking, I'm feeling pretty good right now. I'm feeling like I could do a pretty good job out there on that stage. Bet you if I had just one more sip of that, I could do a great job out on that stage. So I took another hit, and I took another hit. And I'm standing there thinking about the show and thinking about what an amazing job I'm going to do out there. And I'm sipping on this bottle, and I looked down. It wasn't like a gallon bottle or anything like that. It was like a pint. But now I'm halfway through it, and all of a sudden I realized that Carl's going to come back, and he's going to see this, and he's going to realize that I was the only one that knew that it was in his bag, and he's going to hold me responsible, and he's going to say to me, "You drank my booze, dude. You got to buy me another one." And since I got to buy him another one, this one's mine. That just made perfect sense to me. And I went out on stage a little bit later, and one of the things I was supposed to do, I was supposed to kick a football off into the wings. And instead, I kicked it off the side of my foot out into the audience, and I think it hit one of those grandmothers. And I was slurring some lines, and halfway through a song, I sang the same verse twice, and I thought it was hilarious. I was cracking up, and I I was pretty much alone with that laughter. I was getting some weird looks from the other cast members, and afterwards, I started being asked a question that was going to plague me for like the next 15 years of my life. What were you thinking? What were you thinking, Jim? And that was the first night that I gave the answer that I would give for the next 15 years of my life. I don't know. I didn't mean to. I I I didn't mean to get drunk beforehand. And that didn't make sense to people, and it didn't make sense to me. How do you I'm married to a woman right now. She's never gotten drunk once that she didn't mean to. And I didn't know her in my younger days, but I've listened to her and her sister talk about their drinking stories, and I'd have drank with this girl. But she's not alcoholic. She can put them away when she wants to, but she's not alcoholic. She only gets drunk when she wants to. And she gets exactly as drunk as she wants to, which now that we're married and I'm in my 50s and she's in her late 40s, not very often. I think I've seen in the 12 years we've been married, I think I've seen her drunk twice. And even that once she was probably just tipsy. So, because that's as often as she's wanted to. Now, I didn't understand that I was physically different from people like her. I just thought that I made bad decisions. I didn't have enough willpower. I didn't have enough control. I didn't, I thought that alcohol was like potato chips, that when you eat one, you want more. I figured that happened to everybody, just like it happens with potato chips, and that other people just were able to flex that willpower muscle a little bit better than me, and that eventually I'd be able to do it too, just a little more practice. And I didn't know that I was in the grips of an allergy or uh, phenomenon of craving. I didn't have any of that terminology. And if that were the only thing that I suffered from, if that were the extent of my alcoholism, then the answer would have been simple. Once it became clear that I had to stop drinking, the answer would have been simple. Just don't pick up the first one. That would have been it. That's actually a solution I sometimes hear offered to newcomers in Alcoholics Anonymous. You just don't pick up the first one, no matter what. That doesn't work for a guy like me because I have another symptom. And the other symptom that I have is I have these strange mental blank spots. I have this obsession of the mind. I have these peculiar mental twists. These are all different phrases that are used in our big book to describe the inability that an alcoholic has at certain times to remember not to drink. And that seemed like a strange thing to me when my sponsor tried to walk me back through my experience with that, because when I came to AA, I actually already had embraced the idea that I had that problem because I had tried to stop drinking in the summer of '99, and I managed to stay away from it for a little while, and then I picked it up again, and then I tried again in the fall of '99 to stop drinking, and I kept going back to it. I could stop, but I couldn't stay stopped. I couldn't keep myself from starting again. And I had come to the understanding that I can't keep myself away from booze. But within just a few couple of days, a few short weeks in Alcoholics Anonymous, hearing people say things like, you got to think it through, you got to keep it green, you got to remember how bad your drinking got, I forgot my own experience with alcohol. I forgot that I'm not able to think it through. I forgot that I can keep it green right up until I forget. That's the problem with an alcoholic mind. I remember not to drink right up until I forget to remember, and then I drink. And seeing that symptom sitting in AA a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple months sober was hard for me because it felt like I had the power to make a choice today to not drink. It felt like I had that power. It looked like I had that power. But fortunately, I ran into a gentleman in AA that understood the fatal nature of this disease, because the fatal nature is not in my physical allergy. The fatal nature is in my inability to stay away from it. And he helped me go back. And he said to me, do you have experience with times when you did not want to drink, when you had really good reason not to drink, and you drank anyways? And I had those experiences in the fall of '99, the summer of '99, but he walked me back through my drinking history, not to just look at the war stories, but to look for these symptoms. And one of the things that I found was that I had a couple of occasions where I was dead sure, absolutely certain I had no interest in picking up a drink of alcohol, and I did anyways. And I'll share a couple of those with you. One of them was the night before my first wife and I were to be married. And the fact that I used the phrase my first wife gives you a hint how well that turned out. Um, the night before, we're sitting in a hotel room with a bunch of our friends, having a few drinks, having some fun. And she says to me, listen, I can't see you tomorrow morning, so I need to ask you something now. And I said, yeah, what's up, honey? And she said, when my dad brings me up the aisle tomorrow in the church, please be sober. If you want to, we're going to have open bar at the reception afterwards, and we're all going to drink and we'll have a great time. But at the church during the ceremony, be sober, okay? Don't drink before that. That's a reasonable request for a bride to make. And I gave her a reasonable answer. Of course, honey, no problem. And we had already had quite a few conversations. Nothing really pointed, but it had come up that she was concerned about my drinking. And I knew that this was not just an offhand request. I knew how important this was to her. And I could tell by the look on her face when she was asking me to promise her this, that this was not a, hey, remember to pick up milk on the way home. It wasn't that kind of thing. I knew I was making a promise that meant everything to her. And so when I made it, I meant it. I had absolutely zero intention to drink the next morning. And the next day, when her dad brings her up the aisle and pulls the veil back and he gives her a kiss and she turns to me, it takes her all of about a second to realize that I'm not sober. I wasn't falling down drunk. I wasn't kicking footballs off the side of my foot like I was that day in my senior year in high school, but I wasn't sober. And she knew me well enough. She knew that. And I remember the look on her face. And then the question a day or so later. She didn't ask me then. She didn't ask me that day. But a day or so later, she said, I thought you said you weren't going to drink. And I said, well, yeah, I wasn't drunk. I wasn't drunk. And she said, well, you weren't sober. You'd had something. I could tell. And that hurt her. And I didn't understand the symptoms of alcoholism. I didn't understand that when the thought of a drink came to me that morning, the love I had for this woman, the importance that I understood from the man that raised me of keeping my promises, all that stuff out the window. And I took a drink. And that doesn't make me different or unique or special. Just makes me alcoholic. Had almost the exact same conversation with my mom about 3 years later, the night before we were going to bury my father. My dad had died of lung cancer, and my mom said to me, tomorrow morning at the church and at the cemetery, I need you sober. Can you do that for me, please? And she made it clear. She said, when we get back to the house, you want to drink with your cousins? You go right ahead. We're all going to drink when we get back to the house. But in the morning, I need you sober. And I gave her my word. Absolutely, Mom, you can count on me. Because I didn't understand that when it came to alcohol, no one can count on me. I can't count on me. So I brought all that to Alcoholics Anonymous. And because I didn't understand the nature of alcoholism, because I didn't understand the symptoms of that illness, I thought the symptoms of alcoholism were DWIs. And, you lose your house and you lose your job and you get cirrhosis of the liver. I didn't understand that there's only 2 symptoms of alcoholism. When I start to drink, I can't control how much. And when I say I'm not going to drink, I do anyways. That's it. And I've got stories and personal experiences that lay that stuff out. And because I didn't understand the nature of the illness, all I had to go on was what I had read in the psychology textbook in college. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I do things that don't make any sense, I have to try to make sense of them. I have to try to explain myself to me. Even at the point where people around me were no longer bothering to ask me any questions about my drinking, I needed to explain myself to me. And when I look back at, well, why did I break Donna's heart on our wedding day? Why did I break my mom's heart on the day that we buried my father? Why did I do that? Because I didn't understand this illness. I grabbed onto this description that I found in a psychology textbook of what a sociopath is. A sociopath is a person who is unable to form meaningful emotional connections with other human beings, and that they're able to fake those connections, but they're not actually able to form them. And when I looked at my behavior, that's what it looked like to me. It looked to me like I didn't really love my mom. I just said that I did. I didn't really love this girl that I was marrying. I just said that I did, that I was a phony and a fraud, and that I didn't really care about anybody except myself. I know today that's a lie, but it was the only thing that made sense. Nothing else could explain to me why I drank in the face of a sincere desire to not drink. Why else would I do that to these 2 women? When I was in my late 20s, a few years before that, my oldest sister was diagnosed with a tumor on her optic nerve, and she had to go to Boston, Massachusetts for surgery. And we lived about 3 hours away from that in upstate New York. And my dad said to me earlier in the week, Judy's surgery is on Saturday morning. We're going to Boston on Friday. When you get out of work on Friday, come, we need you there. And I told him I would. I got there Friday night and I managed to get through the evening without drinking, and got up the next morning. I was crashing on a cot in my parents' hotel room, and I went over to the hospital with them, and they brought her in to start doing the pre-surgery prep. And I'm sitting in the waiting room with my mom and my dad. And I ran out. I realized I was down to like my last cigarette or two. And I said to my dad, I'm almost out of smoke, so I'm going to run across the street and get a pack of cigarettes. And he said, don't go anywhere. Stay here. And I said, well, I'll be right back. And he said, just smoke one of mine. And I said, I don't like yours. He smoked these non-filtered Pall Malls. I wanted a Marlboro. I said, I'll be right back. And I remember this weird look on his face, just looking at me. Jim, Don't go. Just stay here with us. He already had the experience of me saying, I'll be right back, and then not seeing me for a day or a weekend. And he was afraid that was going to happen. I didn't know that that's what he was thinking. Looking back on it now, I remember the look on his face, and I remember being puzzled by it. But he was right. I went across the street and I got a pack of cigarettes, and I came out of that store, and I remember looking up at this hospital, and all of a sudden it hit me. I'm in Boston. Cheers is in Boston. I'd never been to Cheers. My sister loves that show. And you know what? She'd probably really like a souvenir T-shirt or a mug or something like that. I can't do anything to help her right now. She's in surgery with the doctors. I'm not a doctor. I can't help with the surgery, but I could do something thoughtful. And I'm telling you this story because as I went back through my experience with times when I didn't intend to drink, but I drank anyways, it always made sense. If my alcoholism showed up, if the thought of the first drink showed up looking insane, I might be able to defend myself against it. If my alcoholism presented itself as, hey, let's go drink and burn your life to the ground and alienate everyone that you love and throw your career in the shitter, I'd probably be like, no, hold on a second, let's think that through. But that's not how it presents itself to me. It presents itself to me like, why don't you do something loving for your sister? Oh, okay. Makes perfect sense. So I went to Cheers. A couple hours later, as the bartender's telling me that it's not okay to yell Norm every time somebody slightly overweight walks in the front door. And
that's awesome.
I'm running out of cash. and I realize I've only got enough left for maybe one more draft. And I figured, God, I came over here. I had some cash in my pocket. I had quite a bit, and I only got a couple of bucks left. But I did eat something. I did have a cheeseburger while I was sitting there, and such and such, but I didn't get her a mug yet, and I didn't have a credit card or anything like that. I only had the cash that I had on me, and it's like, oh crap, I'll have to come back later. You know what? I'll go back over to the hospital, and I'll sober up on the way back to the hospital, and get some gum or some breath mints or whatever. And then I'll tell my dad that I found Cheers, and maybe him and my mom will come over here for dinner while my sister's recovering, and we can get my sister something. So I had that one last beer, and I walked out the door, and it's pitch black outside. And I asked somebody if they knew what time it was, and they told me it was about 1:00 in the morning. And I walked over. I walked back to the hospital. It took me a while to find my way back there. Realized that I didn't have a key to my parents' hotel room where I was supposed to be sleeping, and I was also supposed to. They told us, housekeeping had told us that when you check out, or that when we checked in, we got a cot there that day. I wasn't sure if I was going to stay Saturday night or so, and they said, well, then we're going to take the cot back, but if you need it, just let us know and we'll bring it back for you. And I hadn't done that. And I remember standing outside the door of that hotel room. It was about 2:00 in the morning. And I know I have to knock and wake my parents up so I've got a place to sleep. And I'm trying to think about, I got to knock loud enough to wake them up, but not so loud that I scare them or make them angry. And trying to figure out where that level of knocking volume was. I remember standing there agonizing over that for a couple of minutes, just like, should I knock 3 times? Should I just tap lightly, and going through this as if that had any bearing at all on what was going on. And I finally just knocked, and my dad opened the door. And if you're an alcoholic like me and you've hurt the people that love you with your drinking, I don't have to describe the look on my father's face. You know it. You've seen it. Next day, he said to me, what were you thinking? And I said, I don't know, because I didn't. But that kind of stuff, well, geez, I must not love my sister either. I don't love my parents. I don't love my sister. I don't really love people. You bring that kind of that kind of heavy-handed pronouncement upon yourself and walk around with it for a while, it's kind of understandable that your all of your relationships start to sour a little bit. I was a high school teacher at the time, and people, I was having trouble with my anger and my temper, and when I finally came to February of 2000 and got to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was not because I suddenly realized I needed to improve my life. It wasn't because I suddenly had this, wow, I'm going to go get sober and everything's going to be okay and I'm going to rebuild from here. It was actually the opposite. I I had had a another crash and burn with another relationship, and my job was hanging on by a thread. And I got to uh, I got to a place where I I was sitting on my living room floor on a Saturday morning, and and I was starting to go through the plan. I don't know if you guys ever had the plan of, okay, my life's a mess again. Now what am I going to do? But I started going through the plan of, what, the hell with those people. I just need some new friends, and the hell with that bar anyways that keeps throwing me out. I'll find a better bar. And in this job, I don't like my boss all that much anyways. And that girl, she's just not the girl for me. She doesn't seem to understand, appreciate me. And I'm gonna just move on. I'm gonna start over. At this point, I was 33 years old and starting over. I was an expert at starting over. It was a necessity. It's what I did really well. Another town, another relationship, another job. That's what I'll do. I'll start over. And for some reason, on this February morning in 2000, as I'm making that plan, this new thought came into my head. And I don't have any way of crediting this thought any place other than God, because it was something I had never thought of before when I'd made this plan. Every time I'd make this plan, I'd have full faith that this time I'll make the plan work because I'm going to find the right girl and the right job in the right town. And then all of a sudden, this thought goes through my head: go ahead, Jim, do your best. Doesn't matter. You'll be right back here. And I knew it was true. We talk in Alcoholics Anonymous about hitting bottom, and the nature of what happened to me on February 12th of 2000 was not, oh my goodness, this is the worst it's ever been. It was, oh my goodness, this is the best it'll ever be. This is as good as it gets. Broken relationships, career in the shitter, family and friends that they might still care about me, but they're keeping their distance, and a bucket full of self-loathing because I don't really love people anyways. I'm a sociopath. So the idea of just checking out entirely started going through my mind, but I was raised with certain religious beliefs about what uh, what happens to you if you kill yourself. And I was suddenly struck by the injustice of the whole deal regarding suicide, because it suddenly occurred to me that the only reason that someone would truly contemplate suicide is because they were already in hell. And if you're in hell and you're trying to escape it by committing suicide, and the outcome is you go to hell, that just didn't seem fair. But I was also taught growing up, the religious background that I came from, that God loves us and forgives us. And I thought, okay, I'm going to use that against God. I had heard that you're going to meet St. Peter at the pearly gates, and he's got some kind of a log there, some kind of a guest book that you got to sign in, and they check, have you been good? Have you been bad? All this stuff. And he's probably going to bring up the fact that, well, if you're here right now, Jim, you're a little bit early, so you must have killed yourself. So, sorry, can't come in. But I'm going to throw this whole branding thing, right? That I know about this whole product that they've been selling me since I was a kid, that God is loving and God is forgiving. That if that's true, if that's really true, then God must have seen what was going on down there, must have seen how much I was suffering down there. And I want you to go back in there, St. Peter, and I want you to just tell the big guy, I did the best I could. I tried everything to make it work, and it just wasn't working out. And I just want to come home. And if he still wants to send me down to hell, then you go right ahead and do that. But let's first acknowledge that this whole loving, forgiving thing is bullshit before you do that. And I figured I'll have St. Peter over a barrel, right? I'll use their own marketing against them. This is great. I got him. He's going to have to let me in. And I'm going through this in my head. He's going to say this. I'm going to say that. I don't know if you guys ever like practice conversations that you're never actually going to have. I have a tendency to do that. And I was just doing it again, right? So here I am going over this. And in this make-believe conversation in my head, St. Peter says, well, Jim, did you try everything? And I said, of course I tried everything. You were watching, right? You guys know everything up here. Tried everything. And he said, did you ever try AA? And I thought, well, no, but that stuff's not going to work. And he said, how do you know? You never tried it. Oh, shit. And I came out of this little fantasy conversation sitting there on my living room floor with the very sad realization that I was going to have to go to Alcoholics Anonymous first, and then I could kill myself. That's why I came here, guys. I didn't come here to get sober. I came here so there was no hole in my story when I had that conversation with St. Peter. That's it. Walked into my first AA meeting. And you guys did what AA does. It's described in the early pages of our big book. The man that's making the approach is properly armed with facts about himself. There's no lectures to be endured. If you guys had tried to talk to me about my drinking, Jim, we need to talk to you about your drinking, I'd have been like, see you later, guys. I've got a world full of people outside of these rooms that are trying to talk to me about my drinking. I'm sick of that. Don't want to hear it. You guys didn't do that. You talked about your drinking. I think we forget sometimes what miraculous power that has. Because when you talked about your drinking, I didn't have to defend mine. I didn't have to explain mine. I didn't have to minimize or justify. For the first time in my life, I was involved in a conversation about drinking and about alcoholism. And I was not defensive because I didn't need to be, because you weren't talking to me about my drinking. You talked about yours. And so for the first time in my life, I was involved in a conversation about alcoholism and my mind was open. And I heard you. And there's two things that happened when I was listening to you guys talk about your drinking. A, I heard your experience and I knew from what you described that you had been where I was right then. And B, you sons of bitches were smiling. You were happy. And that right there that's the miracle of AA. That you can describe point A while you're showing me point B. That fills a broken, lost soul with faith. And afterwards, this one guy came up to me, shook my hand, and said to me that if I wanted to, there's another meeting the next night that they were going to be at, and I could meet them there, and that if I would hang out with them for a little bit and do the things that they did, that I would never have to feel this way again. I said, all right. And my plan to kill myself had been to go to this meeting, which was on the other side of the Hudson River, and then on the way home, park the car on the bridge on the way back over that river and leave the car running with the keys in it and jump off that bridge into the icy waters of the Hudson River in February in upstate New York. But I got in my car that night and I drove home and I got up the next day and I went to work and I was thinking about things I had heard at that meeting. And I went to another meeting that night on the other side of the river. And I did that for a couple of nights. And and I worked on the other side of the river too. And it was like 3 or 4 or 5 days sober that I was driving home from work one day. And I was like, oh crap, I forgot to kill myself. It's totally slipped my mind. But at this point, I got 4 or 5 days sober, and I've got some new friends. One of the most powerful things that happened in those early days, in addition to you guys talking about your drinking honestly and openly the way you did, you remembered my name. My third or fourth meeting, people were saying, hey, it's Jim. Hey, Jim. Hey, Jim. People turn around, hey, Jim. That's magic. You guys were happy to see me. At a time in my life when nobody was happy to see me anymore. That just wasn't the case. Most of the people in my life at that point, when I would walk into a room, they go, Jim's here. Hey, Jim. Invitations to Thanksgiving dinner were along the lines of, are you coming? Yeah, you are. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll see you. And you guys were happy to see me. You got me involved in service almost immediately. I was a couple months sober, and I got a job as the assistant literature person for my home group, which I still suspect to this day they invented just to give me something to do. I don't think that job actually existed. And the job was that Rick was the literature guy, but every once in a while Rick couldn't get there early enough. So if I got there before Rick, could I take the books out of the box and put them on the table? And then after the meeting, put them back in the box. And I was just excited about that. That AA needed me. That was pretty cool. And it wasn't too long after that when I met a sponsor that we started talking about the steps, and I did the best I could. And I got to tell you, I'm I'm what you would probably describe as I'm a recovered alcoholic, but I'm also a recovered big book thumper. And what I mean by that is I had a few years where I thumped people on the head with the big book. That's what I thought I was supposed to do. I went around wagging my fingers at people and telling them this is what you're supposed to do and this is how you're supposed to do it. And if you're not doing this, you're not doing AA and you're wrong and it's bad and all that stuff. And that's not what I do anymore. That's not the message that I carry. I am what I now refer to as a big book hugger. I don't know. A big book thumper says this is what you should be doing. A big book hugger says I don't know what you should be doing, but I love this book. This book saved my life. It changed everything. This is what I do. If you're interested in doing what I do, I can show you what I do. If you're interested in taking some other approach, then you absolutely should do that. I support your freedom to find the path in AA that suits you. And one of the reasons why I came to that was I had a friend of mine during my big book thumping days who walked me back through my first couple of years in AA, where I was not following the directions of the first 164 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was not wagging my finger and sponsoring men according to the way that it's supposed to be done and all that stuff. I wasn't doing that stuff for the first couple of years of AA. And you know what else? I didn't drink for a couple of years. And that kind of messed with my head when I had to finally confront that truth about my own recovery, my own journey here. That the stuff that I had been telling people for a couple of years that was the only way to really recover from alcoholism, was the only way to do AA right, my own experience pointed out the false nature of that statement. The book itself says, we have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which you can find God. The very book that I was touting as the only way to do it says that it's not the only way, and that the men and women that wrote that book had no desire to convince anybody of that. So how do I explain then those first couple of years of sobriety in AA? It's easy. The love of God working through you people, carrying my sorry ass, bringing me to meetings, bringing me to district stuff and area stuff, and getting me involved in service. B, the willingness that I found to just do what I was told. I think if I had met guys early on that said, this is what we do, and they had introduced me to the first 164 pages, I probably would have done it right out of the gate. That's not who I met. I met guys that said, we go to these meetings over here and we do this stuff over there and we do this over here. And I was willing, I was open. I think the one thing I did correctly, and I'm still trying to do today at 20 years into this deal, is surrender. Surrender. What do you got? Okay, I'll do it. But I did come to a point where what I was doing in those first couple of years, it kept me away from booze. But about 4 years sober, I was starting to ask myself, is this all there is? Is this it? I just go to meetings and I do service and I sit in the same chair in the same meetings and listen to the same people say the same thing. And I say the same thing. And they're getting sick of me and I'm getting sick of them. And every once in a while, a newcomer shows up and they go, yay, somebody new, because we're sick of each other. And I was like 4 or 5 years sober and I was listening to guys with 10, 15, 20 years of sobriety. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, is this it? This is all it? This, I just do this over and over again. And AA was starting to feel like a sentence. It wasn't feeling like freedom anymore. I was glad I wasn't drinking. But at this point, I was single at the time. I was closing in on 40 years old. I really had this desire in my heart that I believed was God-given to be a family man. And I wasn't even dating anybody. And this thought in the back of my head, if I got to go to meetings 7 days a week, because at that point I still believed I did. If I got to go to meetings all the time, if I've got to do all this different stuff all the time just to stay sober, how could I ever be a husband and a father? So God, in his infinite wisdom, said, well, let me help you with that, Jim. Because the minute that I ask an honest question like that in my own heart, God loves to answer those. And he answers them in some interesting ways. He put me on a 787, maybe, I don't know, big ass plane. One of the ones with like 3 sections, like seats near the windows, but then a center section too. Put me on one of these planes to go to China to teach at a university in Xi'an, China for a semester. And use my pride and my ego and all this stuff to get me to agree to do this trip. I was terrified. There was a part of me that didn't want to go. I knew before I went that there was no AA where I was going. And what happened was God stripped away all the things that I thought my sobriety was built on. I thought my sobriety was built on talking to my sponsor every day. I thought my sobriety was built on going to meetings every day. I thought my sobriety was built on saying certain prayers and reading certain books and doing some rituals. I thought my sobriety was built on me doing things because I'd been doing things for a number of years and I wasn't drinking. So I wasn't stupid. It was actually a logical conclusion to draw. But I had raised a new question in my journey. Is this all there is? And God was like, funny you should ask. But in order to show you what more there is, I've got to take away the things that you think you're standing on, because that's not what you've been standing on. So he puts me on this plane and I spend a semester away from all those things, away from my sponsor, away from AA meetings. And while I'm there, I meet an alcoholic that can't stop drinking. And he wants to stop drinking. And I realize that the only message I have for him is go to 90 meetings in 90 days, and there's no meetings where we are. Or you need to just not pick up the first drink, and he can't do that. He keeps picking up the first drink, and he doesn't want to anymore, and he keeps doing it. And I was blessed. Jonathan and I were both blessed to be visited while we were in this city. I was trying for a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, to get him sober, largely because I thought that I could get somebody sober, which isn't true. And this woman, Janet, showed up, and she had these cassette tapes with this big book workshop. And that was where I was introduced to the directions that are in those first 164 pages. And that's where I learned how to write a 4-step inventory from these cassette tapes. Two guys who have since moved on to the big meeting in the sky, Joe Hawk and Mark Houston. And they both they walked us through those pages. And they showed us how to write inventory, and they showed us how to make amends, and they showed us a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't aware of that was in that book. I had written an inventory once in like my first year of sobriety. It was pretty much a autobiographical epic drama of me. It was amazing. I got to tell you, it was very impressive. I was impressed with how impressive I was to me. I was the center of this story. It was all about how much I had suffered, and it'd make you cry at how hard life had been on little Jimmy. That was that 4th step. But here's the deal. Here's why that 4th step was effective, because it was all I knew to do. So I did it, right? I surrendered. Somebody said, write your story. That's your 4th step. Okay. So I did best I could. I had made some amends those first couple years. Most of my amends at that point were going to people that I might still want to either crash on their couch or borrow money from. And I told them I was sorry. That's pretty much all I did. Just told them I was sorry. And they said, okay. And that was it. And I thought, hey, I made amends. Do I think that that's my idea today of making amends? Hell no. But at the time, that's what I thought I was supposed to do. So I did it. I surrendered. And that's why it was effective. But now all of a sudden, I'm finding out that there's more available here. I'm finding out that I can take a journey back through my life with some very pointed questions and hold the lens of your experience up to the things I've been saying and doing. And I started looking at where I've been selfish and dishonest and self-seeking and all that stuff. And I have to say, the reason why I became willing to write this inventory and make much more meaningful amends is because I had also taken the first step again. I had taken the first step before I got here and met you guys, but I had lost it along the way. I thought that my alcoholism at 4 years sober, I had forgotten that I couldn't hold the decision to not drink. I was still aware that if I start to drink, all bets are off. But I didn't realize that betting on me to stay away from the first one was a stupid bet. That's a stupid bet. When I finally went back with that sponsor that I finally hooked up with, that we went back through that first step, and I looked at my failure to keep myself away from the first drink, I made the decision that I would never again hire me to keep me away from the first drink, because I suck at that. I'm terrible at that. And my failure to do that hurts people deeply. That real understanding of that first step and what powerlessness and hopelessness really meant in my life is what powered me through that 4th step, made me willing to stare down the barrel of the truth of me, and made it possible for me to start contemplating the idea of going and helping people heal from the harm that I had caused them. And I was one of these guys that I believed for a long time that I didn't have to make any amends where I might get in trouble, because, it says we only make amends unless it would injure them or others, and I was part of others. And this sponsor that I had hooked up with just laughed and laughed. He just had such a big belly laugh out of that. And he said, have you ever in your life really thought that when you talk about other people, you're talking about yourself? I mean, isn't that what others means? Everybody but you? That's what the word others means. There's a different word that includes you. That's called us. But the word others means all of us except you, right? And I had known that all along, but I was afraid to get in trouble. I was afraid of people being mad at me. I was afraid of legal and financial consequences for the harm that I had done. So I hid inside this idea that I don't have to make amends if I'm going to get hurt because I'm part of others. Well, he disabused me of that misconception. But what had happened also as I went through the process of writing that inventory and and asking God to help me be willing to make these amends, is I became acutely aware that there was pain in the world that I had set in motion that was never going to be set right unless I did something about it. And I'd begun to awaken to a point where I was no longer okay with other people suffering when I could do something about it. So what did that look like? What do I got? I got about 10 minutes left here. I told you my dad died of lung cancer. Well, I told you he died. I don't know if I mentioned the lung cancer. That was one of the things I really struggled with, was how do I make amends that this is the most important human being in my life, and he's already gone. How can I possibly make amends to him? That look on his face that night in that Boston hotel when I disappeared for hours. He's already worried sick about his daughter, who's got a tumor on her optic nerve and is having surgery inside her skull that day. And I made him worry also about his alcoholic son, who's out there somewhere in a strange city. He doesn't know if he's alive or dead. And it was not the first or the last time that I did that to my dad. And I was also aware of how much I had come between him and my mom, how much I had mistreated my sisters over the years. And I knew how much he cherished my three sisters. And that every time I mistreated them, that hurt him too. And even if I make amends to them, he's dead. So my sponsor said, well, our book suggests that there's people we can't see. We write them an honest letter. I had always thought that just meant for people that were too far away. And he said, no, that means people that are dead too. Write them an honest letter. And just write what you would say. And he walked me through, my sponsor walked me through some pretty clear-cut directions for how to approach somebody, how to lay out the harms that I've done. And then most importantly, how to ask them to tell me the terms of the amends. It's not for me to tell you the measure of your pain. It's my job to ask you, what do I need to do to balance the books between us? And then to listen while you tell me, and then to do it. But that's how I make amends today. So I wrote a letter to my dad where I tried to do the best I could with that. And I went to his grave and I read it to him and sat there in the grass waiting for some kind of an epiphany to come. Come on, Dad, what do you need me to do? Nothing came. And finally I said, all right, this is a bunch of bullshit. I got in my car and I started driving home. But as I got in the car and started driving, I was in my hometown, which was a couple hours away from where I was living at the time. And it occurred to me that, you know what, my mom still lives in this town and she really likes, anytime I go to visit my mom, she'd always say, hey, you know, have you stopped by the cemetery to say hi to your dad? And even though that didn't really mean all that much to me to go and look at a gravestone, it meant something to her. So, you know, I thought, you know what, I'll call her and I'll leave her a message. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to go over to the house and leave a note on the door because she's, I know she's out of town this weekend, but I'll just leave a note on the door that I was in town and I stopped by to say hi. And I swung by the cemetery and said hi to Dad. That'll mean a lot to her. And I went over there and knocked on came around the back door that she usually uses to go in and out. And the door was open and my mom was sitting in this back room and she's sitting there crying. And I walked in and I said, what's going on? She had just gotten a phone call from a friend of hers from her high school days telling her that another high school friend had committed suicide the night before. And she said, I'm just sitting here, just my heart's just breaking. I can't believe we lost him. And she said, I'm just sitting here praying to your father, asking him to help me. And she said, what are you doing here? And it started to occur to me what was happening. And I said, I was just at the cemetery, Mom. And I was asking Dad what I could do to make things right. And then the thought came to come over here. So I'm here because Dad sent me. And we had lunch and hung out for a little bit. And I got in the car and I was driving home from that. And I had like 2 hours in the car driving along. And I asked my dad, is that it? Are we square? what else? And I started thinking about the day that he fought cancer for about a year and a half, and he when he was readmitted the last time, the I got the phone call from my sister, Daddy's back in the hospital. Can you come up? And I drove up to my hometown. And I walked into the hospital room just as the doctor came in and gave him the results of the latest, whatever it was, CAT scan, MRI, whatever they had just done. The lung cancer had metastasized. We had known that it had moved to his lymph nodes, but now he was starting to have problems with his vision. And they said that was because it had spread to his brain, and he was going to be losing his vision in the next day or so. It was inoperable. It was a matter of perhaps a week or two, more likely a couple of days. And then the doctor left the room, and my sister went after him because she was always the information gatherer. So she went to talk to the doctor, and my mom stepped into the little bathroom, and I could hear her crying and throwing up in there. And I looked at my dad, and I said, "You need me to do anything?" And he said, "Yeah, I need to look after the girls, Jim." And that's not what I was asking him. I was asking him, like, do you need a drink of water or a pillow or something? Like, can you give me a reason to leave the room too? Because I don't want to be in this room right now because I can't face the fact that my father's dying. I was too much of a coward. And so when he says, "I want you to look after the girls," I changed the subject. I said, no, I meant you want a drink or something. You want I get you some Sprite down the hall? And he's like, "Yeah, fine. Get me some Sprite." And that old look of disappointment went across his face. And I'm driving in the car home from my mom's house years later, trying to make amends to my dad. And this is the memory that comes up. And I think my dad's kind of sticking it in and twisting it, right? Reminded me of how much of a disappointment I was to him. But I was taught to listen when I make amends. And I suddenly realized that the question that I would have asked him, had I been able to look him in the eye to set things right, that I asked that day, "Is there anything you need me to do?" And he had answered it. "Take care of the girls, Jim." I've got 3 sisters, 2 older, 1 younger. They do not need me or any man to take care of them. They are incredibly powerful, intelligent, capable women. They don't need me to take care of them. They let me. My mom's 82 now, 83. And she doesn't need me to take care of her, but she lets me. And I've gotten remarried, and I've got 3 daughters now. And every once in a while I say, "Dad, that's enough." How many girls are you sending my way? The 2 oldest ones are off of college now. And pretty soon they're not going to need me to take care of them anymore. Matter of fact, if you ask them right now, they'd say they don't. But they let me. My youngest is 10. Yesterday we were outside raking those leaves, and she spent about 2 minutes with me raking our yard. I had told her we're going to spend at least a half an hour out there working. She said, "Okay." 2 minutes into it, she said, "I don't want to do this anymore." And I said, "Oh, yeah?" And she said, "I want to go next door and do Maud leaves." And Maud is this elderly woman that lives next door to us. And I said, "Why don't you go do that, honey?" So she did. And about 15 minutes later, she's done doing that. And then she goes out in our backyard. And my wife's out in the backyard, out there with the dogs. And I hear my wife yelling at my daughter about something. And I hear my daughter yelling something back. And I hear my wife's voice going up and my daughter's voice going up. And I've come to understand that mothers and daughters steer clear, not my business. I love them both. They'll sort that stuff out. They don't need me to coach or referee or anything like that. But my little one got herself in pretty good, in trouble with mom. And then she came over to me a couple minutes later, and I was bagging up some leaves, and she came up to me and I said, "I want to tell you something." She said, "What's that?" I said, "Today you raked Maud's leaves next door, and that was a loving, generous thing that you did. And half an hour later, you're yelling at your mom, being a little brat." And she said, "I know, I'm trying to be good." I said, "Honey, you don't need to try to be good. You are good. And I want you to know that those two things, that's your whole life. You're going to rake leaves and you're going to be a brat. That's okay. You guys taught me that. I came into this deal thinking that if I did anything wrong, then there's something wrong with me. It's not so. I've lied, but I'm not a liar. And I've stolen, and I'm not a thief. And I've hurt people and been vicious, and I'm not a vicious man. I've come to understand that in the human condition, I'm capable of anything. But thanks to the presence of this power, thanks to your love, your fellowship, thanks to some simple directions that I've been given to follow, I get to live a life today that's radically different from the one that I was living when I was thinking about jumping off that bridge that day. And it's not perfect because every day I rake some leaves, and every day I'm a brat. That's me too. That's all right. Uh, my inventory introduced me to the truth of me, all of it. The amends that I made to people introduced me to the depth of love and forgiveness. I believe all that comes from God, but it comes through you and it comes through me. We can be channels for that. Now, I'll finish with this. I heard my friend Gary say this a couple of years back. And the first time I heard him say it, it kind of jolted me. He's not with us anymore. And I think he'd get a kick out of thinking that he'd get a kick out of knowing that this is still being shared. He introduced himself. He said, "Hi, I'm Gary, and I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I stand before you an empowered agent of the Almighty God of the universe." And I remember thinking, that's a pretty bold thing to say. I stand before you an empowered agent of the Almighty God of the universe. And then it hit me. Well, shit, I am too. That's a job that's open to every single one of us. The job application looks a lot like the third step. And the resume looks like my inventory. And being on the job looks like 10, 11, and 12. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys this morning. I love you dearly. And looking forward to 20 more. Thanks.